And a second? Jerry, all in favor?
Yes.
Very good. So moved. And I'd also like to remind folks that we are still under the governor's emergency executive order to conduct our board meetings via video conference until further notice. Members of the public who wish to address the board during the board meeting must submit prior to the meeting by emailing the board meeting at fbusd.us. And staff will attempt to make all attempts to share and record any submissions received prior to the meeting. And if you do need translation, the DO needs 72 hours in advance notice. So do we have any public comment on agenda items?
There's no public comment.
Okay. So we can move right into reports, which is 4.1 Superintendent's Report.
Okay. So a few things. In-person instruction. We are happy to report that the high school will be returning in-person students 4 days a week. That'll be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. There have been many phone calls to our sites asking, well, how come the high school can do this and other schools can't? And that's because the number of students who've committed to in-person, we can have them return and still maintain 6 feet of distance. So we're exploring, we continue to explore the 4 feet and 3 feet of distance, but as of right now, the high school, we can bring them back 4 days a week because of the participation level. So we're going to do that starting on Monday. So we're happy about that. We will, like I said, continue to explore the 4 foot and 3 foot distancing at our other sites. Graduation and promotion, this has been a hot topic on many people's conversation list. We are really aiming for a graduation ceremony for Fort Bragg High School in Timberwolf Stadium. For alt ed and adult school, we are looking at a graduation ceremony on Piver Field, so it's outdoor. We are following the CDPH guidance on outdoor events. If we are in the orange tier, like we are right now, we can hold an outdoor event in Timberwolf Stadium at 33% capacity. On the home side of Timberwolf Stadium, there are 1,500 seats. 33% would be 500. We have roughly 125 graduates. That would give each graduate a block of 4 seats. If we move into the yellow tier, then graduates can have eight tickets. Because at the yellow tier, outdoor events can be housed at 66% capacity. So for Timberwolf, that would be 1,000 seats. Then the question becomes, how do we assign them? Because it's very specific that it's assigned seating. Eve Yeomans very beautifully outlined and gave us a map of Timberwolf Stadium on the home side. We will be outlining blocks of seats either in 4 or in 8. We'll be numbering them, and then it's going to be a lottery. We'll draw a kid's name, and then we'll draw a number, and that student's name with that number will be assigned those seats. And we're going to do that for the entire class. We'll probably have to do it live so people can see that how it's being done so folks don't get hurt feelings. That's how I anticipate we're going to do this right now at this point. We'll probably be doing seat assignments at the last minute just so that we can wait to see if we're in the yellow tier. The question also came about graduation. Well, why don't we use the visitor side to increase more seats? If we use the visitor sides, which we can do, then the students would need to face a goalpost. If they were facing, let's say they were facing the scoreboard in Timberwolf Stadium, we would not be able to live stream at the goalpost in Timberwolf because we would have to bring out internet and power. If we want to live stream effectively and make sure we don't lose the feed, then we would need to live stream from the press box. That means the students would need to sit facing the press box. They could face a goalpost, but everyone would just have to be happy with seeing the sides of their heads. So that's what we're looking at right now. We're hoping that we move into the yellow tier. We're hoping that we can have 1,000 people in Timberwolf. I'm hoping that that'll be enough. We'll map it out and then we'll hold a lottery on how we can assign seats. And then we have to make sure that people go to their assigned seats. So it'll be a little bit trickier. We'll have maps for everyone, but that's what we're looking at for Fort Bragg High School graduation Alt Ed, again, on Piver Field, we would have to place people in pods by family. And then for the middle school promotion, we're talking about in Timberwolf as well, but we have to wait and see, again, what the capacity is based on the tier that we're in. The other thing I failed to mention is the senior class has also indicated that they would like a parade, to start off with a parade and then go into the stadium for graduation. And I have no problem with giving them that. These poor kids, they've been incredibly patient and very kind with just trying to get through their senior year. So that's what we're looking at for graduation. I know that's been on the minds of many people. We are pushing for a Timberwolf Stadium graduation for Fort Bragg High School, Timberwolf Stadium promotion for Fort Bragg Middle School, Piver Field graduation for Alt Ed. Alt Ed typically has their graduations in Cotton Auditorium, but that's an indoor facility, and that's why we are not even entertaining that. And we spoke with the Alt Ed staff, and they would like it in Piver because it's the field right next to their school. So questions on any of that? Yes, Scott.
So going back to the high school in person, I've been asked the question, why not 5 days? In-person instruction. Why not 5 days? Because we still have a significant number of kids on distance learning, and we want to have 1 day devoted to distance so that there's not a pull between in-person and distance. Great question. Thank you. Diana.
I just, because I don't have children at K-8 or even elementary, do the staff have a pulse on if folks really do want, more days, or are they feeling like they want to write the year off the next 8 weeks? What's the pulse? Because I feel like maybe people are holding out for a full day, and so they really wouldn't increase. I was just thinking those that are attending, there's no way to get them there 4 days, the current.
So the difficulty with K8 is that there are more kids participating in in-person instruction, which is great. But more kids means more kids. So if we combine the Monday, Tuesday kiddos with the Thursday, Friday kiddos, then the only way we can fit all those kids in the room is if we move the desks and we reposition them instead of 6 feet down to 4 feet or 3 feet. So we're looking at that right now. And we're also trying to gauge the pulse. Will parents want to send their kids if there are more kids in the classroom? So we're trying to do this methodically as quickly as we can, but it takes time because we have to measure and see if we can get the desks in the room. If we go chair to chair and go to 4 feet, what does that mean? How many can we fit?
And the only other, I've had a couple of people ask about playground, playing outside or time. Will that change with potential color change if we go to yellow, or what's the deciding factor so kids can, go out and get some fresh air?
So right now school is very limited. It's only 3 hours. And so we've had the discussion of that. Once we go to yellow, we could talk about the playgrounds for sure. And Bainbridge Park is open right now. So I don't have a problem with the kids going out for recess. We just have to make sure we have the supervision and we can stagger it appropriately. So really it's about the scheduling. And what's difficult for the hybrid model right now is managing the age of the kiddos. So it is much easier as the kids get older to manage in person and online at the same time. The kids are self-sufficient. You can give them direction. They'll take it. Picture doing that with a 5-year-old, right? Or a 6-year-old. Managing the in-person kiddos who, the kindergartners, this is their first time on campus. So managing all those needs, then still managing your kiddos online. It's a much different lift. It's a much different ask. So that's the difficulty. As you get up in age, it gets a little bit, I don't want to say easier, it gets a little bit more manageable, but it's still a difficult task. And that's the difficulty with K5, is that K5 managing online and in-person is a little bit trickier. 6-8, they can manage it and they're doing it quite well. And I have to tell you, I commend the middle school because them doing the self-contained classes really was brilliant for this year. They were able to keep all their teachers have created great relationships with their students.
And so they're not moving around, which means they're really just staying in their pod. So with that, again, we have so many kids at the K-8 level who are participating in in-person instruction. If we combine those days, then we need to have enough space in the classroom to have all those kids there. And that's what we're working on right now. And I can hear the banter in the chat in the background. Why is it taking so long? Because we have a lot of classrooms, and those classrooms aren't all the same size. And not only are they not only the same size, the desks aren't the same size. The furniture isn't positioned the same way. So it takes a little bit. But we're doing the best we can to move as quickly as we can. Any other questions about in-person instruction or graduation promotion before I go to the next one? Okay, so the last one is in-person meeting participation. So I know that there are some school boards in our county who are returning to an in-person meeting. They are limiting the number of people who could be in a room. Dr. Corrin has said that if you are vaccinated, you can be all together. I don't want to start saying, are you vaccinated or are you not vaccinated? I don't want to put people in that kind of position. That is their private information. I have no problem being in room 306 fully masked and keeping part of us in this Google atmosphere and part of us in person so that we can provide an in-person response for public comment. And how that would have to be done is we would have to have a Chromebook at the podium so that if someone wanted to provide in-person public comment, they could go to the podium and jump on the Chromebook. Does that make sense? Where we are so that everybody could see it. Or we could also do it by telephone call. We have a telephone in that classroom. We could put that person on speaker. They could call in. So those are some options for you that we can discuss at the May meeting. And we'll know by the May meeting if we're in the yellow tier or not. That'll give us more information. Dr. Corrin did say if we were going to move into the yellow tier at this point, the soonest that it would happen would be May 10th. Yes.
So the vaccinated folks, is that also the public? We'd have to ask anyone that went into the room if they were vaccinated as well to give a public comment? Not sure.
How I didn't.
We may not
when
know.
we talk,
okay.
I got this information from Becky Jeffries at the county. And so she showed me Dr. Corrin's response. And I don't want to put Dr. Corrin on the spot because I did not speak to Dr. Corrin about this. And he's got 100 million questions coming at it. So my understanding, though, from my conversation with Becky Jeffries is that we as a board, Wendy and myself and all of you and Renee, if we all want to be in a room and hold the meeting and limit public access, we keep the doors and windows open, we give an opportunity for public comment. Public comment happens at the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, so we really don't know if we need to ask people if they're vaccinated before they come in the room.
I don't like doing that, to be quite honest with you.
Well, no, I don't either because, and I'm just saying that there are, believe it or not, folks that are falling through the cracks for different reasons because either their age or they're in the wrong industry. So there are people still waiting. So I would hate to turn someone away that wants to give public comment that, just isn't 50 yet. And just last week we went down to 16. But if and when you talk to someone, if we know if a negative test would allow someone to come in, I'm not that I want to burden the district because I don't know what our PPP level is. But if that would equate to if you can't show a vaccine card because you're waiting in line for your turn, would a negative test allow you in the room?
I think normal masking should allow you to be let in the room, just like normal masking lets you go to Harvest Market or Safeway. So I have no problem with that. And I have no problem being the one in the room setting up for public comment so that we can have a live public comment venue. So we can talk about that in May. And I'm happy to just do it and have it on the ready for May.
Great. Thank you for the information. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to the information and discussion of this special meeting? So it looks like we're ready for 5.1, the budget workshop that will be presented by our Chief Business Officer, Wendy Boyce.
Here we go. Okay. So this is kind of an awkward time to start doing this because there's so much still unknown out there. We're waiting on the May revise, which isn't going to happen until the middle of May. So we're working based on the numbers we have. And there are a few things we know. For instance, we know that the STRS rate has gone up 1%. We know that our unemployment rate has gone from 0.05% to 1.23%. So that moves us from an expense of about $5,700 to almost $145,000. So that was a little bit of a shock. There are people who are clamoring, saying that the state should pick that up and cover that for us, but that just means that they're not going to cover something else. So I don't know how realistic an idea that is. The one thing, did you want me to share that summary page, Becky, that I had with nothing changed in it?
I think that would be great.
Okay, so I will pull this up and I get the right screen. I'm finally figuring this system out. Okay, can you see that? Okay, so because we're in this in-between time, we're still showing the current year and then the 3 years that are going to make up the budget. We are required to show 3 years out when we prepare a budget. And you can see that in our estimated ADA, because we're allowed to use the prior year, we are held harmless for our ADA. So we won't be, even though we're down some students this year, we're allowed to use the number from last year. And because that's the case, next year we'll be allowed to use that number again because we have, this year is higher than next year is anticipated to be. But you can see that we drop off quite a bit in 22, 23. The one thing that saves us there is that they are anticipating a COLA right now for that. So that's taking up a little bit of the loss. But if we had, we're down about 125 students right now. And our assumption is hopeful that about 60 of them will come back. And we're basing that on the numbers that we know are being homeschooled or that have specifically expressed that they are going away temporarily to stay with family somewhere else that can help them with online learning. So this 1633 is the number with the hopeful returns. And so if we had those students back, it would be another $600,000 to $700,000 that we would see in our LCFF revenue. So you can see, that takes its toll. The other thing that is not in here is any of the additional coronavirus relief funds that are coming. We had the large amounts for this year. We currently have them all budgeted out. Some of them will not be completely spent this year, so we'll end up carrying them over. But at this point, they're all included in these expenses down here somewhere. So the federal revenue drops off quite a bit because of that. We have not yet entered that in because we don't yet have a complete plan for spending them. So I haven't included anything because it's going to be a wash anyway, and it's one time, so it doesn't impact our ongoing. Same thing with state. There was some state coronavirus relief funds that came in this year that are not included in here. There are a couple of other adjustments to things that we know are going to happen. Right now, we do not have built in any increases in salaries. We do have a slight increase in our healthcare costs because we know that's going to go up probably about 3%. I think we have a little more than that in here right now, but it looking more like it's going to be 3%. And then our books and supplies and services have been reduced based on the coronavirus relief funds being one time. And so we won't have those to spend again. And the other thing that I have included in here is a full funding of the board required reserve. And the thought behind that is to be able to, since some of our expenses are reduced this year, we will have more carryover than we generally do. So fully funding that now takes it out of every year continually putting something away. So it helps us in the long run. to be able to do that. And we also then have it. So if there are other things that come up that are outside of our control, we would have that reserve to be able to fall back on. And so that takes us down to our available fund balance. And next year it's up a fair bit because of that restored COLA. They are compounding it a little bit with at least at this point, the COLA that was originally forecast for this year, plus the original forecast for next year. And it's a blended amount. So that comes into play for next year. And then you can see by the bottom line that we're deficit spending a bit, and that continues into the third year out. We would be deficit spending by $866,000, and that would bring this down to $2,221,000. So that's, we're okay there. I think that we would be permitted to consider that a positive certification and move forward with that. Adding other expenses to it would put a little strain on that, but we could handle some additional expense if it did come to that. So that's kind of what we know right now. It's like I said, it's very hard to know what's going to be in the May revise because there have been so many things going on in the economy, and we don't even know the full impact of them yet. So it's going to be a little bit of a wait and see. And I think what we might want to focus on tonight is looking at our supplemental concentration funding to look at some priorities for using those funds more with a thoughtful eye. So.
Jerry?
So with this proposed budget, based on a lot of assumptions, I know we go through this every year, with no pay enhancements for anyone, we're still $881,000 negative in the third year out?
Yes, we are deficit spending by that much.
Okay, thanks.
And if all of those students came back, we would probably be at about a break even without any other additional expenses.
So can we include in the May meeting the second interim letter from the county that I think we all received by email, which warns us about our deficit spending and that our reserves improved. Well, I don't know if the reserves improved a little bit because of the COLA. We were expecting 0. So you've got the new COLAs in that summary you just showed.
Our reserves improved because you voted to establish a board reserve, and they were very happy to see us do that. And again, some of the impetus behind increasing that is to be able to weather the deferrals, which we are right in the middle of now. And we will not need to borrow from other funds. We will not need trans in order to do it. The COLA restoration did help with that for a lot of districts that were planning on having to do that, ended up being able to skate by because of the COLA anticipated for next year. So our cash flow situation is going to be fine. We're still being told to anticipate deferrals again next year. So, having that comfortable cushion at the bottom for next year is going to be helpful for that again, so that we won't have to do any borrowing.
Right, and they just still state that we have the declining enrollment. And what's confusing on the letter to me, there was an area that states our reserves are way larger than in my head what the numbers are. And so do they include in that letter fund balances? Like if you have you've got them in your pots of money, that they include that in the percentage from the county perspective?
They include the undesignated unassigned fund balance. They include the reserve for economic uncertainty, and they include the board required reserve. So when you add all of those things up.
So that looked like a very different number in reserve, but that's really not. Some of that is let's say, would textbooks be in that number? in the sense that
No.
that's, so what extra, what carryover that you didn't use and as an example that's in that, padding that reserve, because it's really not extra money is what I'm trying to get at.
Right. It's the anticipated ending fund balance for this year. And some of that is not signed or designated. There's reserve for economic uncertainty, so that those two together are about $2,100,000. And then the board required reserve right now is at approximately $600,000. So those all together are what they're looking at. And there are certain other things that we have assigned that fall into unrestricted reserves that will increase that number also. But we consider them kind of quasi-assigned.
Anyone have any other questions for Wendy? And so the LCAP and the supplemental concentration funds, we'll talk more about that in May, the priorities of that, and is that number?
Well, I don't know, Becky, did you want to go through that tonight, or do you want to wait and do that at another time?
It's up to you. We have the LCAP. I shared that with all of you today. We've got the LCAP comments. We can look at that today and have that discussion. It is part of the budget. The supplemental and concentration funds is something we need to explore and talk about. And I would say that if it would be a good time to do it. One of the things that we have not done is look at our supplemental and concentration money and really plan for it from the ground up. And so we have an opportunity now to look at our LCAP for the next 3 years. This is the next 3-year cycle, and how we use that money to make sure that we are identifying and targeting the goals that money is intended for. So I'm happy to share my screen and us to look at the LCAP suggestions that we've collected so far. I'm going to meet with Link Crew on May 5th. I thought I was going to meet with them next Wednesday, but they have something going on. So I'm going to meet with the Link Crew leaders at the high school on May 5th to gather their input as well. It's up to you. Right now, the biggest thing for supplemental and concentration, a couple of things that we want to move in there. One, we've been talking with our DLAC and our Latinx community about a family liaison, regardless of what language you speak, about having a family liaison. Some of our families, don't know how to navigate the school system. What do you do for a short-term contract? When is it? What do you do to clear an absence? Just little things to navigate the Fort Bragg Unified landscape. And it becomes increasingly difficult if there's a language barrier. So one of the things that we talked about was creating a position, a family liaison position, to be clear, one person to navigate Dana Gray in the high school. That person can walk across the street and serve both sites. And then another person to do Redwood in the middle school. And originally when we had this conversation, I originally said, well, one for Redwood, Dana Gray, and then one for the upper grade so that they could understand those programs better. But the truth is that Dana Gray and Redwood are the heavy lifts. Those are the place where the mommies and the daddies need the help. The parents need the help the most. So if we had one person share those two heavy sites, it would make it difficult on both sides. So it makes more sense to have a liaison share Dana Gray in the high school and one to share Redwood in the middle school. So that's something I would like us to do out of our supplemental and concentration. Other things in our supplemental and concentration is I'd like to move all of athletics into supplemental and concentration. Wendy and I have talked about this. We talk about encouraging family engagement and making it possible for our families to participate more in what their kids are doing. When a family comes into Timberwolf Stadium, if it's 2 parents and 2 siblings, that's almost $20 to get through the gate. So if we moved everything into supplemental and concentration, then what we could do is we could not charge for the gate. The games would all be free, minus the playoff games and the special fundraiser games. But that would alleviate some general fund contribution from on what we put towards athletics. It really is above the core, because when it comes down to it, if we have to make some really tough budget decisions, how many times does athletics come on the chopping block? We talk about eliminating transportation. We talk about eliminating sports. We talk about eliminating coaches. In any case, I'd like to see that go into supplemental and concentration. We have,
and if I could, Becky, just some things like the family liaison are in the 3-year plan might be funded with COVID money because it can support outreach to families who are struggling for the first couple of years and then move into supplemental concentration in the 3rd year, especially if it turns out to be a successful program. So some of these pieces might start in one place and end up in supplemental concentration.
So there are other things that we can talk about with supplemental and concentration. We're looking at some family health services, student health services with Mendocino Coast Clinics. I don't believe we are going to have a contribution for that. But if we do, where do we want that to come from? The social worker right now, we're going to be funding with their COVID money. If that's a success, then we should look to that being rolled into supplemental and concentration in future years. Social worker typically has 40 to 50 families that they case carry. Well, do we have more than 40 to 50 families that potentially a social worker could help in Fort Bragg Unified? Potentially. So is that something that gets increased down the road as well? We talked a lot about mental health services, and we have mental health services right now for our students covered with our COVID relief funds. If that becomes something that we want to continue down the line, then that's something also that we could continue through supplemental and concentration. Supplemental and concentration is there to do more. It is to do more for our unduplicated count. We've talked about hiring more aides so that our classrooms have more support, especially during this return from COVID time. The difficulty right now is that we don't have a workforce from which to choose. We have many positions that are open and we can't get applications. So that makes it difficult. There's lots of things that we can discuss with supplemental and concentration. I'm happy to show the LCAP engagement if you'd like to discuss some of that now. We need to discuss it at some point because I have to be able to write the LCAP with your input. So
I just had a couple of thoughts because this is always a struggle and there's always something that comes up. For instance, the local control accountability plan. And I know we've never really had a task force per se, but I love the concept of like the site councils being maybe the first to call for this, equity stakeholder task force where we can get some folks to come, that are, want another meeting. Who wants another meeting? But just so that most of the time, like a site council has either a department staff member or, a grade level staff, because I really want to get it to be broad, broader than just, parents inputting, or do we do a staff survey? I just feel like we need to have more opportunity. And that's the hard part because no one wants to do another meeting. But the Google Meet kind of makes it nice. But maybe if we ask by survey, I know we've done that in the past with the LCAP. And then I don't know if Parents Square, any of the comments, I know you have an opportunity to make a comment, but any of the messages that we've been getting, is that monitored or are we getting any fruit from those comments from parents or staff? Just so some ideas. I just feel like, I don't know what that task force will look like, but I'd like to have something in place because we're going to have equity issues from now and forever. And if that team of stakeholders can provide that, when you need it, if it's 3 times a year, if it's once a month, if it's, twice a year.
We have many things. We're juggling many different initiatives and many different priorities right now. And that's the challenge. There are a myriad of things we absolutely need to address. And so how we do that and in the timing that we do that is always the challenge. Fixing the airplane in flight, what takes the priority? So as we move on, I will tell you that the priority for me, Becky Walker, is getting our kids back to full-time instruction. And from the full-time instruction, making sure that their mental health is addressed. And that's through our social emotional learning, making sure that our counselors are fully equipped and ready to provide the staff the supports that they need, and also utilize the extended mental health services that we are contracting with right now for general ed students as well as special ed students. And then providing the professional development that's needed to help our staff do the job that's at hand. So would you like to look at the LCAP comments? Do you want to save that for next time? Do you want to have a conversation? I mean, this is your meeting. What would you like?
This presentation that you have is the summary of all the meetings. So I think that we have time to briefly go over, to touch on some of the topics that were discussed at the meetings, so that this can count as some stakeholder and get people thinking about options and what families need and want and staff.
Okay, can you see that? Okay, so I just checked. We don't have any public comment. That's probably what you saw the first time on the screen. So what I did with this parent engagement is I put the goal. This was the document that I had shown all of our groups. And then what I did is I took the meeting. So this is from DLAC, and I put it in a different color so you could follow the colors. And then I put the date. So the first goal was the college and career. The suggestions from our DLACs: provide more education for parents. Many parents feel that college is expensive and out of reach, which I found interesting because college is absolutely within reach. So we need to do a better job of that education, provide more education on post-secondary options and the education needed for various options. Parents believe that their kids have to go to college for big careers, and many parents are unfamiliar with the options available to their children. So suggestions are for college and careers really about parent education. Again, this is where the parent liaison came from. The site council, again, talked about parent education nights and doing them only in Spanish and only in English, because when you're sitting in a meeting and the translation goes back and forth, it's just exhausting to try and pay attention. So we're going to try and do a better job of that. And then place a greater emphasis on scholarships and pursuing funding avenues. So that's something that we can also do for this goal. In the Redwood LCAP meeting, we talked about apprenticeship programs through expanded learning, and expanded learning is really the after-school program. What can we do through assets and kudos to offer some types of apprenticeships for kids so that they are making those connections from school to work? And then provide more college education nights for parents. Again, educating parents was a big thing mentioned several times. Parent education nights on how to support students to be more successful in school, provide videos on shorter segments on how to support student success, and then fund annual college fair trips to Eureka or SRJC. So that's something that we're already discussing. Wendy and I talked about how we could carve out some supplemental and concentration money for college visits, but making it very targeted and systematic, meaning every fifth grader is going to go to Mendocino College, check. Every eighth grader is going to go to, is it Humboldt State? Is it Sonoma State? Is it SRJC? What is it? Every ninth grader is going to, what is it? I know that AVID has a very robust plan on how they kind of attack the college visits from 9th grade to 12th grade, but how can we expand that so it's not just the AVID kids or not just the upward bound kids? So we're looking at that more closely. Good old Kelly Farrell, our AVID director, is going to give me a little bit of that so that I can see how that evolves over the years, and then we can designate supplemental and concentration money to make those trips happen. And then we had a community meeting on April 5th, and we didn't have any suggestions there. And then the high school LCAP meeting include more Mendo College opportunities, and they were talking about having more dual enrollment classes or articulated classes through the college, and then develop community relationships for future internship opportunities. And then the Latinx community meeting that we had two of them, one on the 8th of, and this is wrong, one on the 8th of April and one on the 9th of April. And then again, the family liaison came up. The Dana Gray Parents Club meeting last night that we held, extend virtual college tours, and they really said bring that to Redwood. I need to change these dates. I did this incorrectly. Extend the virtual college tours to Redwood so that kiddos in our primary grades can start seeing what a college looks like and having that conversation. Inviting FBUSD alumni, and on the screen there are FBUSD alumni. But inviting FBUSD alumni to talk to our kiddos and talk to them about living on campus and college, early conversations about college and career. And then the garden program was brought up to provide hands-on learning with health education included. So, and then I'll meet with the Link Crew class, the Link Crew leaders in their virtual learning team meeting next in 2 Wednesdays. The second goal of increasing student academic achievement, remember that we changed this goal. It was close the achievement gap, but we changed it to read increase student academic achievement because we really want every student to gain some academic growth every year. If you're the valedictorian, we want you to gain. If you are working at grade level, we want you to gain. If you're working below grade level, we want you to gain. So we re-engineered this goal to really try and capture that target. For our DLAC meeting, we talked about additional English tutoring for Spanish-speaking families so that the families can navigate our system better and better support their kids. Speaking English tutoring for students as well, so that our students who are in the classroom and who are newcomers to our country can learn the language faster. And then, again, that's just going to aid with their success. Also promoting bilingualism. I thought that was a really good comment. It's not just one way. That DLAC meeting was really a very fruitful meeting because one of the things I said was, I want to learn Spanish. It's my biggest weakness is that I don't speak Spanish for our community. And I would love to learn Spanish. So I'd love to partner with someone who wants to learn English and have this two-way relationship of speaking to me in Spanish, I speak to you in English, and we work together to try and get both of us to be in a better spot language-wise. Creating English-Spanish community club where folks can learn English or learn Spanish, which is what I just talked about. A dual immersion program at Redwood and what that means. The difficulty with the beauty of dual immersion is that it's beautiful. It's a great thing if we can make it happen, but it requires bilingual teachers. So if that can happen, that would be fantastic. Explore a teacher on staff from Mexico for 1 school year. We did this in summer school, I want to say 2 summers ago. It was fantastic. And then work with Latino students to maintain culture and connection to school to inspire success. There was a real discussion about loss of culture and what that meant to families. So trying to maintain that. The middle school site council, they wanted to know, could there be a stipend for our bilingual family liaison position? They loved the idea. What can we do to inspire that and create that? They had the suggestion of a liaison for each school. The Redwood group talked about exploring, expanding the after-school opportunities for students to support their academic setting. How can we expand the Kudos Assets program? More training for the support team, meaning more training for our aides who are in the classroom, more training for our Kudos staff who are working with kids after school, provide more small group and tutoring opportunities for students below grade level and English language learner. Again, more small group and tutoring opportunities, direct support for kids who are not performing at grade level or require extra help. From our community meeting, it was provide additional tutoring through the after school program. The high school LCAP meeting said, why don't we expand Anchor Academy? Let's expand AVID. Let's offer more support classes. The LCAP engagement meeting with our Latinx community. Again, the bilingual liaison, who's familiar with the school system to help parents navigate ARIES and monitor their children's academic progress. And then the Dana Gray Parents Club that happened yesterday, they wanted to use the garden space as a life science lab, have an NGSS teacher in the garden to act as a science TOSA and also provide science instruction to our students. I love the idea of expanding science. I love the idea of expanding it to our garden. We reduced that garden position because of funding, and we also wanted to make sure that the specials did not take away from the core. And right now, my main concern in moving forward is that we dedicate as much muscle as we can to making sure that our students are reading, writing, and performing mathematically at grade level. And if we have programs that are going to enhance that, great, but it can't take away from the core. So I have no problem with re-exploring, reimagining the garden program. I just have to give you my 2 cents that I don't want it to take away from the core and our core times. And the hard part was that when you have a special and you have to schedule everybody, it kind of disrupts that schedule. But I'm happy to look at it again if that's a priority that the board has. And then I'll meet with Link Crew again on May 5th. The last goal is of improving school culture. The DLAC said communicate with actions rather than saying no. They wanted to really press upon for our students who are English learners, teaching them to get what they need, not by saying no, but really teaching them. Instead of saying, no, you can't do this, here's what you can do, let me show you. So I thought that was a really good, very solid example that the parents had brought. Teach our students to respect many cultures. This goes back to equity. We are more alike than we are different. And just because something is different doesn't mean that it's less than. So really using our social emotional learning to address that. There's no better time than the present to really look at the differences and saying they enhance us, they make us better. The Psych Council at Fort Bragg Middle School, they wanted to see more award recognition opportunities to improve culture. They wanted recognition for good grades and academic progress. They wanted to see peer mediation and peer mediators for conflict resolution to improve school culture. Academic banners for teams for group GPA achievement. They talked about how at the high school, when a sports team has a certain GPA, then they get an award that to honor that. And is it, hey, the 6th grade right now has a collective GPA of whatever it is, and then honoring those types of recognition. The Redwood LCAP meeting for culture, they talked about increasing mindfulness activities and social emotional learning opportunities for everyone, for students and staff, providing more leadership opportunities for students so we can grow more mindful kids, continue supporting students' understanding of their emotions and their biological responses. And I thought that was a good one too. Just so the board knows, we did purchase Second Step, which is a social emotional learning curriculum. We purchased it K-8 for the district. The middle school curriculum is online, and we purchased different components for that as well. We hope to do more training with Second Step as we move into the fall. The community meeting talked about providing more training for all the staff, including after-school program staff, in regards to PBIS, SEL, and ACEs. SEL is social emotional learning. ACEs is adverse childhood experiences. And then the high school LCAP meeting, their suggestions were to explore more community and school shared events to promote community service. They really saw community service as something that we needed to encourage with our kids. And one of the things that I've noticed from living here is we have a lot of kiddos who return to Fort Bragg. We have a lot of students who graduate and either stay here or they come back here and they want to raise their kids here. And look at the people on the screen. You graduated, you were gone for a little while, you came back. And what I've noticed from that in my 20 years on being on the coast is that any type of community connection we can make with the world to work, connection we can make to career, all those kiddos who are going to come back, we're going to give them a leg up on being a very productive community member of our small little haven here. So I really appreciated what the high school was saying about just that community shared events and community service. They also talked about exploring additional student clubs, again, to kind of cast that net out wide so students had more things that they could particularly entertain when they were in high school. The Latinx meeting that we had Talked about, again, hiring a bilingual family liaison to work with families on Spanish-only education nights, have a bilingual family liaison to host cultural events, to invite parents to engage in school events, and provide more than one family liaison. The Dana Gray meeting that happened yesterday talked about inviting guest speakers to help with SEL lessons. So it's not just the teacher, but bringing in other people from the community, inviting them to share in that experience with their kiddos, and then providing guest speakers for health education as well. And then I have not met with the Lean Crew leaders yet. These are the LCAP notes that I collected from students pre-COVID. So alternative education talked about improved food selection, installing a hydration station at Alt Ed. And we're not doing that right now because Alt Ed is getting a new site, and that's when the hydration station is going to be put in. Allow for vending machines with water and healthy snacks. They wanted driver's education classes for all students. They wanted better buildings. That's coming. That's coming. Include the following classes for students. They wanted financial survival. I loved this next one because I remember meeting with the kids and they said, we need adulting classes. And I said, adulting classes? They said, yeah, I need to know how to change a tire. I need to know how to sew a button. I want to pay bills. And I thought it was fantastic. So that was definitely heard. Life skills, parenting classes. We had one kiddo who said, I want a parenting class. I want to be a better parent. Okay, good comment. Social skills, job application, providing opportunities to visit colleges and trade schools, give students more of a voice and a choice on how they want to learn, which is what we're doing with Big Picture Learning. So many of these things are going right in there. Provide one-on-one opportunities for students to build relationships with adults, teach staff to have realistic expectations. A student expressed frustration that the teacher expected her to download notes and to stay after school to complete schoolwork when both were impossible. She had no printer at home and the only way home was to ride the bus. So hearing those things from students really wakes us up and reminds us that it is not a one-size-fits-all approach. We really do have to differentiate and have reasonable expectations based on what the kids are able to do and the access to resources that they have. Teaching social skills to students so that students are more compassionate and understand how to navigate social situations. That was a reoccurring theme among the schools. The high school wanted additional career classes that teach real-world skills. They wanted outdoor classes. They wanted no homework for senior second semester, which I thought, write it down. Other world language options. They wanted something besides Spanish. Ending grade periods the week before school break to allow time to get caught up. They wanted assets during school hours. They wanted to have a tutorial available like during their lunch period, during break, during a period where if they needed to get out of class, they wanted to have a tutor available to them. I thought that was interesting. They wanted advisory back to the bulletin. They didn't want assignments for advisory at the time. It's been changed up since. Benchmark assessments by paper, not just online. And that was really in relation to, this was the first year that we had done math assessments online. Interactive assemblies, they wanted continued Google training. They wanted one-on-one device or Chromebook carts, which that's taken care of. School wireless access blocks, some things that the kids need. They wanted that unblocked. They didn't want the dress code. That's an ongoing discussion every year. More communication between teachers about assignments, tests, essays. They wanted a later start time. I have to tell you, my husband asked me last night, how much power I had. I laughed at him. He said, this 9 o'clock start time, Becky, I'm telling you, it is fantastic. He said, we get up in the morning, we have this very calm breakfast, we get ready and we go. Well, the difference is my husband does that one day a week on his day off, which is Friday. So of course it's wonderful. For the families who need to get out the door, right, to get to work on time, 9 a.m. might put a little a stick in the get along there. So, but the kids wanted a later start time at the high school, which research backs. They wanted a block schedule at the high school, and they wanted an athletics study hall and more student voice in ASB, advising representatives in ASB. So the middle school wanted more teachers and more classes. Not all kids get the help they need. And this again was back in March of 2020. Increased tutoring opportunities, more bus drivers. They wanted the block schedule. It's hard to focus in math classes. And they wanted a full block. They wanted a break on Wednesdays. They didn't want the block on Wednesday at the time, the kids who I interviewed at that time. They wanted the library open every day. So that's something that we brought to you with the AB 86 money. Having the library assistant shared between the two sites made it difficult because they could not access the library on days that the librarian was not there. Busing available within town because we were taking it away. PE, they wanted more games and more objectives. Advanced math classes. We had one kid said, I want uniforms. I don't like having to figure out what I need to wear every morning and then being judged on it. And that was a really interesting comment. Trash cans needed for cleaning. And they said some trash cans were in not very good shape and they wanted new trash cans. I appreciated that comment. They wanted more field trips, of course, band and a full student schedule. This comment was, if you're in band, a full student schedule is hard because you don't get the electives. School helps with learning, another kid said. Repairs needed on the basketball courts and the hoops. Campus culture, students are mean to each other. They wanted help with that. What I vividly remember about this meeting is that the kids were really good about talking about the culture on campus and what they needed to do to help recognize and teach kids how to be better to each other. And I vividly remember one kid saying, we know that when kids are mean, they're having a hard time in their own life, but we just don't know how to help them. And then teach study skills for students. Students need more motivations. Repairs to the fields are needed. We knew that. Paint the flagpole. Differentiate the homework. And that was brought up because the kids were talking about how sometimes the homework was just so intense and they didn't know if it needed to be that way. And then more classes available to meet college application requirements. There were some kids who said, why can't we start that in 8th grade? If we're ready to start that, why can't we start that in 8th grade? And so we told them we're working on that. The Spanish class is one opportunity. So this year kind of derailed that. But once we get back to full in-person, that's definitely viable. And then Dana Gray, I have to tell you, Dana Gray was the most fun that I had when we had done this. They wanted vaping sensors on campus. And this was over a year ago, but they were talking about how that was starting to kind of creep into their existence. They wanted a better playground for Dana Gray. They said it's not fair that Redwood gets this wonderful playground and Dana Gray doesn't. They wanted an earlier lunch break. Students are hungry at 12:35. And that's for the last group that has their lunch at 12:35. The track at FBHS, they wanted to have more access to that track. They wanted to be able to go and run and be on it whenever they wanted, not just on scheduled days. I tried to explain to them that we have another campus. We have, things are happening there. That's PE. They wanted the math rotations to be longer. They wanted more time for math, which I thought was interesting. And we shared this with Barry Silva today. They want softer wood chips. They say they fall and they don't like getting splinters from the wood chips. And there's softer ones out there because some of the preschools have the recycled tires. And so they said, that's what we really need because we're bigger and we fall a lot. And I thought, okay. Basketball rims on the courts. They said it's hard to earn the kachas. They wanted the equipment repainted. There's the shredded rubber on the playground. Change the way teachers teach concepts. Good teachers equals students excited to learn. Bad teacher forced you to learn a concept. And these were their words. The teacher makes the difference. Breaks after tests and quizzes. Yard duty staff are not the most helpful. Pod Squad, they need more direction. They don't do much. Pod Squad needs to help out more in classrooms and in school. Best things are the teachers, math class, recess, science, assemblies. They like their field trips separate by grades. They wanted field trips separated by grades. And then they wanted better gotcha prices. Chromebooks, they need a lock on the bad websites. We've taken care of that. We had some kids who were participating in a Celis. They said it's okay, but they thought it was boring. They liked Kahoot and Variety Online. Chromebooks assigned to students and checked out all year. They wanted to take their Chromebook home, took care of that. They wanted a longer recess at 2:10. They said they needed to move at that point. They wanted more PE and they wanted more yard duty staff who care and show up. So again, remember, this is not a blanket statement to everybody. These were really comments that were made by kids in that moment. Some of this has evolved. But what I have to tell you, what I vividly remember a year ago talking with kids, is that they really do believe that their teachers care for them, and they felt that they were loved on campus. And that really is a testament to all of our staff. So this is what I have gained so far for public input on our LCAP, which is why I brought to you the family liaison piece. I think that's a perfect place for us to be in supplemental and concentration, or like Wendy said, it could be part of the COVID relief funds and then transitioned over. Wendy, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, just, this is kind of a starting point for some of our budget items that we're considering. We didn't intend this to be an LCAP forum tonight, but it does drive some of the budget things that we are talking about. So it's good information.
So when will the first read be of the LCAP? Are we having to do that cycle come June? I mean, before then. I
anticipate to have the first read when the sites prepare their site plans for you, so that you can see the LCAP and the site plans and how they all weave together. And so the intention is we're going to make a special meeting in May for that. So we'll have to look at our calendars.
Well, I loved you compiling all the meetings, and I really enjoyed hearing parents had great suggestions, and staff and the kids. I made me feel like I was in a classroom listening to kids. So that I like the language that you kept the student's voice on the input sheet. So thank you for doing that. So do we have any questions moving forward about budget workshop, Mary, before we move on to the next item?
Just real quick, obviously the liaison came up lots and lots of times. Is that something, a position we could get going for next year?
So the plan is right now, we need to negotiate a job description with CSEA. So I've contacted their reps to look into that. So the first step is for us to look at a job description together. Once we get a job description nailed down, then I bring it to you at a board meeting for you to review and do a discussion. I'm hoping to have that by the May board meeting. And then after the discussion, we'll put it on the June board meeting for action, and then we'll post it to hire.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And just so all of you know, I'm checking public comment, and there's no public comment.
Thank you. Kathy?
I just wanted to comment that I really appreciate this time through that the comments and suggestions for parents were really impacting a lot of students. I feel that the last time, not the last, but I think the first LCAP cycle, like way back when, people were giving very, very specific suggestions that would impact maybe a group of 10 students. So I just want to, we've come a long way. And so I really do appreciate that those things that those parent groups and or community members were bringing, they really are great ideas that will impact a lot of students. So I just appreciate that.
And the last question that I have is, it sounds like the liaison was something that maybe will be supplemental concentration funds, but also could fit into potentially our discussion coming up with funds from COVID, and learning loss. So I guess, Wendy, you'll be trying to maximize our dollars to make sure that, we can do all these supportive things for families and kids and learning loss. I mean, that's your job.
That's the goal, and it's the intention of many of the pockets of money.
Great. So we'll move right into the 5.2 on the agenda, which is the AB 86 state funding options.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and present, let's see, do this again, see if it can work. I had to move it to my other screen because it was, I think this is the right one. Share. Okay. Are you seeing a sort of spreadsheet? Okay. So I'm hiding some of these because I have all of them on the same page here. And the AB 86 in particular is what I've left up here. And all of the things that are included here are kind of suggestions for things that we might do that will fit into the allowable and intended uses. And we did talk about some of these the other night, and actually some of them I've already moved to other places because they are more appropriate there. Right now.
Sorry, Wendy, can you make that bigger, please?
How's that? Is that better? Okay. So we did talk about some of these. And like I said, I moved some of them out already because I didn't feel like they really met the intention of the funds that are there. And I did provide you with that summary about the allowable uses. The AB 86 is in sort of 2 parts, 2.5 parts. The in-person instruction grant, and then the extended learning opportunities grant. And the focus on that really is expanded learning opportunities. And so that's why there were a couple of things that we had originally talked about maybe being in there the other night that I've since moved out. But one of the pieces, like we mentioned, was the instructional aides increasing their hours in restored positions. That's an amount that's fixed, that is intended for that, and that's the only thing it can be used for. As we discussed the other night, one of the suggestions that is widely being touted is to use the in-person instruction grants to pay for staff that has returned to in-person instruction now. And so that helps us free up some general fund money in order to do that. And since not everybody is back, it's not everybody, but we can, pay for quite a bit of staff for the remainder of the year. And that will help us out in the long run quite a bit. The additional full-time librarian, I've got that in here for 2 years. And Becky mentioned that. We felt like that belonged because it's expanded opportunities for students to be in libraries and to get additional supports and tutoring and help. The social worker, this is one of the 3 years that we're talking about, because when I expand this graph, you'll see that the expiration dates on all of them are a little different. So we would pay for a social worker out of this pocket, possibly for one of the years. And then when I expand it, you'll see where we are suggesting as a possibility for the other 2 years. Then we talked about after-school enrichment intervention programs akin to what we used to do in the after-school programs, where we actually had a teacher in the classroom for a couple of hours to help students. And that could be really beneficial for small groups of students after class when we come back, so that they can really focus on those students that need the help. We talked about doing the summer enrichment programs, and this would cover it for 2 summers, because it'd be the summer of 21 and 22, and these funds have to be spent by August. And then increasing our certificated subpay. And the subs are going to be very difficult to find for the next couple of years, and being able to attract more subs so that we can do some of this professional development that we desperately need, and do some of these other field trips and things that you'll see in a couple of minutes from the other resources, is going to be important. And then it would be ostensibly a temporary increase for the time being, but we believe that we will need to probably find a way to extend that beyond just the 2 years. And so what we've got here right now for suggestions is out of the 1.456 million of the expanded learning opportunities, we've got about 1.4 million suggested, and then just the one item for the in-person instruction grant. So we did talk about these the other night, and I don't know if anybody has come up with other ideas or thoughts or preferences for using these funds. But what we have in here now currently does meet the intention and allowable uses for those particular funds.
When it says that that money has to be spent by 8/30/2022, that means it's the remainder of this year and all of next year?
Yes.
That's only a year and a partial.
Right. But for things like the summer, it's all of this summer and all of next summer.
Right.
But yes, it's mostly covering next year, next school year, really.
So my question, because I've read a few articles on positions that we don't normally have or we've had in the past. Is it complicate things if you don't think you can maintain it? Is there any prohibitive of trying to start something that you don't think you can, sustain, or that's not really an issue with this type of money?
We have talked about that, and especially with things like the instructional assistants, we have such turnover there that we're not terribly concerned about having an ongoing long-term issue with that running out. There are some restrictions on the use of temporary funds or temporary positions in the classified side, but we really, I think for me anyway, I'm very much hoping that we can actually find enough people to spend what's here. It's been every year it's been difficult to find people to take those positions. So I'm not overly concerned. The other anything that's going to be the social worker, for instance, this is something we would, if we do this, we'll contract out with the clinic, and it will be an understanding that this will be a temporary 3-year gig, and that it may go away. If we decide it's a thrilling success, then we may decide that that's a priority and find a way to fund it. Supplemental concentration would be a perfect use of that kind of money. But having these funds allows us to not experiment, but to try some of these ideas that probably we hope will be very successful and helpful to our students and our families. And to be able to kind of work out the kinks with these temporary funds, and then as we get to the end of that, decide if we want to make it a priority. And these other things, the after-school intervention and summer enrichment, would be additional time for people who are contracted now. So again, we're not creating positions that would have to be gone. It's more timesheet type things. And the same with the subs. We honestly feel like the increase in sub pay was something that we will have to do long term in order to attract them, because it's as hard to find subs as it is to find instructional assistants.
And so there's time for folks to comment on this AB 86 funding, because it'll go on agenda for May 13. Is that right? For an approval?
Right, because it'll has to be done at a regular meeting, so we can't put it off to the special. So we will, if you agree with these, we'll tweak a couple of them to make sure that we're spending all of it and bring it to you in the template for approval at that regular meeting.
Mary?
Yeah, did I see that professional development came off of that? Is that one of the things you moved? I didn't see
Yes, I did move that.
Okay. So that'll come out of other funding.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I feel like this list obviously is appropriate, and that you're maximizing the money so that we can spend it. And this is kind of not a silly question, but I'm assuming our PPE of all the things we need is still in good order, because would that come out of these funding or in another pot?
No, that's from another pot. We do have a little bit. I didn't have time to get everything in here that I wanted to get in here. I put together as much as I could. We have an awful lot of PPE. We're not overly concerned about needing more of that. We're talking about maybe putting, $25,000 or $30,000 out of one of the other pockets to do that. It's not something that's necessarily an intention of this particular pot.
I'm happy we have time. And I just remember worrying about, you know, testing and the cadence. And we were worried that we wouldn't be able to open, and look at us now. We've got our own testing clinic. So does anyone else have any questions, or is there any public comment on this particular state funding options, or anything that you want to make a comment on, something that you don't think is appropriate? Otherwise, we'll move on to the COVID relief, which is more, I believe, the federal dollars.
So there's no public comment.
Thank you. It looks like we're ready for the COVID-19 relief fund spending options.
Yeah. So again, I put together a whole grid with all of the resources, what we've spent to date, and what's still available to spend, and then some suggestions for what we might need. Now, we don't have a pressing timeline on developing a plan for this like we do with the AB 86 money. And this has been not frustrating, but it's been a little bit chaotic as these things keep coming at us, you know, before we have a chance to really look at what we have and what to do with it. The next one comes. And so it's kind of a constant scramble, but, we don't have everything kind of laid out yet, but we're getting there. So, in the ESSER Act, we have a total of 538. We have spent 211,000. I'm trying to use them as the ones that expire first, so that we can make sure we don't have to send any of it back. So in this area, the classroom furniture for distancing to allow students to come back is a suggestion for that pot of money. And that's in addition to the other things we've spent. And I also did not have an opportunity to put together a full list of what we've spent already. I will try to have that for you next meeting. But these are a lot of what's in there is our NPA, our mental health services. We do have some PPE in there because it was a much broader intended use pot of money than some of the others. We do have, trying to think of what else we have. I believe we have part of one of our counselors in there because we did hire an extra counselor this year. So those are the kinds of things we've been using it for. The 3220, the Federal CARES Act money expired already. Well, it didn't really expire. It was supposed to expire on December 30th. They extended it to next month, but we had already spent it. And a lot of that was spent on our technology, on the TVs, on computers, on the technology piece. But we also spent a lot of it on PPE and on, again, mental health services. And then once it ran out, then we, just shifted that to other resources, and we will continue to do that as they expire. The 3215 LLM gear is 110,000. We've only spent 1,000 of this, and it doesn't expire for a year. But the funds for this were generated from students with disabilities, and so that's where we're planning on using it, is supports, interventions, and supports for our students with disabilities. And I'm working with Carolyn to come up with a plan for the use of those funds. We just aren't quite there yet. The state money, the 7420, was $160,000. We have spent most of it. Most of it was on PPE and sanitization equipment, and we have spent $151,000. We have to have that spent by June 30th, and we believe that we will be able to. That's one of those places where once we've done an inventory of our PPE, if we need more, we will use the rest of that for there. And let's see, the next one is one of the newer ones, the ESSER 2 CIRSA, that the focus on this, and I believe I put that in the summary, is very heavy on our unduplicated count. So it's the same group of students that we focus on for our supplemental and concentration dollars. And so for that, that's where I put this professional development opportunities to enhance learning loss strategies and restorative practices for our students, because largely those are the students that need those supports the most. And then in other thing I have in there is additional reading and intervention supports and supplies and professional development in our reading intervention. And that's mostly with our LLI program. There are continually recommended, there's a whole host of recommended supplies and supports that they recommend go along with the program. And so we're already starting to purchase some of those to be able to fully implement with fidelity that program. We are looking to upgrade and replace some of our Chromebooks. And that's, I think I have that in 2 different places because we're thinking about doing it in 2 different parts, maybe half this year and half next year, because we do have time on some of those other funds to be able to spend them. That will depend a little bit on how many we can access at one time, because the supply chain is still a little dicey on some of the technology. The family liaison, like we talked about, funding it here for 2 years. It gives us a great opportunity to pilot the program and see how it works, and then decide if it's going to be a priority to keep in our LCAP. And if we will probably put it in the LCAP this year and show that we intend to spend our COVID dollars on it for the first 2 years and then switch it over to supplemental and concentration. That's the nice part of a 3-year plan. You can look ahead and say, if we like this. And the other part of the LCAP is when you're looking at it each year, the idea is to look at everything and say, is it working? Is it doing what it's supposed to do? And if it is, then you say, great, we're going to continue it, and then this is how we're going to continue to fund it. And then if it's not working, you say, okay, why is it not working? Is it not working because we're not doing it right, or is it not working because it was a bad strategy? And that gives you the opportunity then to amend it and say, yeah, we didn't like that, we're going to move on to something else. But this particular item seems to be something that the community really wants and sees a need for. So I think if we find the right people, I think it's going to be great. This is the other 2 years of the social worker that I mentioned that we're going to be trying to work with the clinic to secure that contract. Our continued mental health supports for students for 2 years. And that's going to be important ongoing. And we think that there will probably be more of an opportunity with the students on campus for that to actually occur in a meaningful way. We talked about the possibility of having some Saturday intervention. We don't know exactly what that looks like, but it's a possibility for reaching out to some of our kids who really need more. We are looking at trying to find some good math intervention curriculum. We have a good reading intervention curriculum now and the supports. So we're hoping that there will be something good out there. We have people looking right now. We talked about the possibility of buying 2 9-passenger vans. It actually came to light this week that because of the distancing on buses, we have some groups that are larger than a bus can take. And this would allow us an overflow of some kids that could travel in a van rather than in a bus. For instance, our track team was going someplace, they've got 30 kids and 2 adults. Well, we can only get 26 people on the bus. So one of these vans would be a perfect addition to the bus to get the rest of them there and back, and even some of their stuff. Becky talked about this earlier with the college tours and visits, doing this for 2 years and making sure that our 5th graders, 8th graders, and then 9 through 11 have an opportunity to visit some school every year and to give them a better idea of what's available to them. And then the Gear 2, we really know nothing about that. It was tied to this CIRSA piece, but we don't know how much it's going to be. We don't know what the allowable uses are. The only thing we know is it has to be spent by September of 2023. So more to come on that one. We talked about the AB 86. And then I'm going to hide some of these columns so that I can see what I have in here for this. Okay, so this was the other part of the upgrading and replacing Chromebooks. This is the new federal money, the American Relief Plan, I think is what it is. We're anticipating $4.7 million on that. It does not have to be spent until September of 2024. We have no idea if we're going to have to provide a plan for this or not. The state has to provide a plan to the feds about how they plan to distribute it and what their requirements are going to be for reporting, but we don't know anything about that yet. Then there was, we're looking at the possibility of shade structures, DSA pre-approved shade structures to facilitate outdoor eating, because trying to keep that many kids apart in the cafeteria is just not going to be feasible. And there's too many of them to stagger the lunches enough, have kids eating at 2:00 instead of when they should be eating lunch. And we also talked to Pilar about what other equipment she might need to do that, extra carts, extra, I can't remember what they all were now, but and then we would need tables and benches, obviously, to put underneath them. So we are looking seriously at that. One option is one of the things that they specifically target in this particular pot of money is improved ventilation. And the windows at Redwood are not efficient at ventilation because the way they open is not conducive to maintaining any kind of reasonable temperature in the room because they're right above the heaters and it just all blows out. So they're really not helpful. And we've talked to the architects about that, and we think that cost would be in the range of about $3 million. The other thing about those windows is they're 50-year-old 16th inch plate glass, and so they aren't very efficient at all. So that's a possible suggestion for some of that. Our tech infrastructure upgrades. So the wiring for our systems, our tech systems, are ancient, and they cannot keep up with what we're doing now in our with our monitors, with our computers, with our projectors, with the TVs, with all of those things. We've been working with E-Rate to see if we can do this, and we think that this is a net figure because the Category 2 E-Rate could pay for up to 80%. And so this would be a great way to leverage getting our tech infrastructure upgraded by using other funds than our general fund to pay for it. It would help our students with their Chromebook capacities and other technical things that are going on in the district. And it would also it would increase the bandwidth between the sites. So the cost of this is actually more like well over $1 million, but we would be paying this if the E-Rate approval comes through. So that's a good timing too, because we would have to have that plan approved by the spring in order to put it into action. So it would be a good time to do that and a good use. So with those suggestions in there, we're at about 4.7 million, and we can do a whole lot more talking about what to do in this area because we do have some time. And so far, we don't have a deadline on when we have to produce a plan. So those are just some thoughts we've had, and we are certainly open to suggestions, but we wanted you to see that we are doing some research and doing some investigating about what some options might be for that.
And in relation to the shade structures, we actually had a gentleman come walk the campuses today, and I can show you some quotes if you have questions about that. We're not engaged in any kind of commitment at this point. We wanted to give you options of what to do with this funding.
So my question, it kind of was related to that. Are we still having to do, I don't know if it's DSR, what's the DSA approved and that whole process, or are we?
So they would, the structures themselves are pre-approved through DSA. The only thing that would have to go through DSA is an accessibility review, which is not a huge deal, but they have to come in and make sure that everybody has access to where it's put and how it's put. And so that's kind of a minor piece of DSA work, but the structures themselves are pre-approved with DSA.
Okay. And then my other, our HVAC systems are in good order. And I'm also thinking, there's always room for, more expenditures, but were you also thinking of holding back or not reserving, but maybe 20% of the money, because maybe in a year we'll have different needs, just not know, with this last year, we had so much up and down needs. Were you planning to kind of keep a pot, or can we do that?
We don't know yet. we don't know when they're going to want to plan. We don't know how much they're going to make to stick to the plan. But these are just some kind of preliminary thoughts we had for doing this. We have talked about HVAC systems. They're not feasible at Redwood to install. The middle school maybe, but the access to the outside walls in order to install the type of HVAC system they would need isn't ideal. So the cost would probably be prohibitive on that. But we have been discussing it. And there's actually another, AB 41? Is that the one, Becky? With the
I thought it was like a 3-digit number. It was like 465
114
or was something. Pick a number.
114. I don't remember, but the architects are keeping an eye on that. Again, that's something that's still in planning stages. The state hasn't given final regulations on it. They haven't given anything other than that's one of the uses, water systems and HVAC systems. So, and because we live in a rural area, we would be in a good place to possibly apply for them, but we are nowhere near an application process yet. But one of the architects in that office is on the state review board. So I think as soon as anything shakes loose, they will let us know because they know we're interested in finding out about it.
And so I'll ask other board members if they have any comments, but I recall from our CSBA PACER meeting yesterday that they were talking that coming down potentially from Biden's budget, there could be a lot of funding. So I was just wondering if we reserve some of it, we might be able to use those pots of money, but I don't know what, the block grant's going to look like. They were talking about special education and even some facility money. But that I don't know if that's a year away. If the timing's going to be
years
good or
away. Not. Yeah, they're talking about it was part of school modernization programs. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know. The thing is, by the time that happens, we will have to have spent these. So we're not going to really have the luxury of saying, oh, we're going to hold on to this for a few years to be able to do something else with. But it does allow us to do things that are definitely needed without using our general fund dollars to do it.
And that AB was AB 841.
841, okay.
And just so that the board knows, we met with a few people and we're keeping tabs with the architects to see if this is something that we would qualify for and if that would be a good use for us. So we are keeping track of it.
Preview upcoming attractions.
Yes.
So board members, do you have any clarifying questions or comments? Mary?
I understand this is all still in the planning stages for this money as it comes through. I just wanted to say again what I mentioned night before last, that I hope we can find a way to, we're working on supporting our students with their social emotional issues, and I hope we can find a way to support the teachers. I just feel as Scott mentioned, that there's a lot of healing to be done, and to have healthy teachers in the classroom is going to promote healthy classrooms. So I just think that's really crucial.
So Mary, I actually called the county office to express your concern and to investigate and explore what we can do. And all of this money is student centered. We could provide professional development to help with teachers, but providing something like an on-site therapist or any kind of specific one-on-one we can't do, but we could provide professional development to help teachers working with kids and coping with their own needs. So that's the extent that we could do for our staff.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I wasn't clear then if I made it sound like I thought we should hire therapists, because you need to have a whole raft of them. So I didn't.
Well, we can't do that. I mean, I needed you to know that I went and did follow up on that. And please, all of you with the board, the only time that you have to talk to each other is at a board meeting. And we try to give suggestions, not to give the impression that we already have this money spent, but to kind of get us moving in a direction. You can look at us right now and say, you know what? We don't want to do the windows and we don't want to do the outside shade structures. We want to do something else. Great. So this is your opportunity to talk to us. I do have some quotes for the shade structures if you want to see what they walked around and did today. What are your ideas on other things that we could spend this money? Are there things that you've been hearing from the community? Are there things that you've had in the back of your mind? Are there things that we missed in the last couple of bond initiatives that this would be an opportune time if it falls under the guidance of how we can spend this money? So we're ready.
And also putting these suggestions together was designed to provide you with an idea of what an allowable use is and what an intended use is. So we're not married to any of these. They were things that in our discussions around that came up as things to consider.
So it looks like you moved your professional development to the ESSER 2 funds, I believe. And I may have this wrong, but I think what I heard is that ESSER 2 funds are for unduplicated. And I'm concerned that only having professional development funds in ESSER 2 and not in AB 86 may eliminate some of our district population because they're not in the unduplicated.
No, it doesn't, because we are 80% unduplicated, anything we do is going to touch those students. And the type of PD we're talking about is designed to support, because almost all of our, a large percentage of our students who need intervention are in that group. And if we give the teachers better strategies to address them, then that focuses on those students. And the same with our restorative practices training. A lot of our students who are foster homeless have issues with, have mental health issues and control issues and struggle with just dealing with everyday life. And so teaching everybody how to better address each other is going to help all of those students, especially.
It would be interesting too, after hearing all the feedback from all the meetings you had, especially, well, I guess with the families, but really the students, how, if there's any of the ideas or programs, I love like the, classes on parenting or life skills or anything like that. If there's any opportunity to expand our offerings to students with some of these funds, I don't know if that, not
so much with these. A supplemental concentration would be a better use of something like that. Something that we definitely intend to be ongoing outside of the core.
Just all the feedback we heard about, lunchtime or whatever it is. I mean, just kind of looking through that list and be like, hey, is there anything on here that we can use some of these funds for that are one-time funds that would enable the infrastructure to support some of the things that these people have suggested? Really like to hear about the vans. I think it's a great idea, not only for overflow, but there are smaller groups that want to go places and do things, and you don't need a big bus. And on these roads, it's always sometimes nice to have a smaller vehicle. So love the idea about the vans and all the infrastructure. I know we're way out. I think it was ESSER 3 that a lot of the stuff really perked my ears up. Things that are going to need to get done, whether it's windows or wiring or whatever it is. It's, this environment is hard on buildings, and IT is moving quickly. And so knowing that we'll have some resources to keep up with the game is good to know.
Is there anything right now that we mentioned that that anyone is saying, I'm not sure about that? I mean, we kind of need to know these things. Is there something that we've missed?
From my perspective, I know you asked the whole board. I don't know enough, to be honest. I mean, I'm really relying on you guys are living it day to day. You know what the rules are back and forth. You know what the needs are of the district.
Well, the other thing I'm trying to put together is a slightly expanded version of the summary, so that to give you a list of what CDE is saying the focus should be for some of these. So I'm trying to put that together too. I just didn't have time between Tuesday and today to.
Sure. And that's not, that was by no means a criticism, but I think, the fact that we have time to spend these funds and talk about, maybe not AB 86, so that we have to approve that in May, but some of this other stuff is comforting, because we'll have time to kind of keep talking about it and not make all these are big dollars. And this is happening in industries throughout. The government has given lots of money to lots of different businesses, and they're all having these same kinds of conversations. And it's not often where you get thrown quote unquote free money. Nothing's free, but so I think continuing to agendize this stuff as we have to think about it and make discussions, maybe, doing, at least for me, doing research on what some other districts are spending their money on to get ideas on, I know every district has different needs, but kind of what they're spending money on, and maybe perk some ideas for us. But, you guys are doing work. Yeah.
I do watch that. I have a listserv that people are constantly chattering about what they're doing. And it is, some of the things are common and some of the things are very district specific, but it's kind of all over the map, and everybody's struggling with the same thing. What's the best thing to do with these funds?
Kathy, it looks like you were going to unmute.
I was just going to say that we got some very lengthy documents yesterday at the CSBA meeting, and I think they're very useful, but I haven't had the time to spend with them, as far as, what Scott was saying about the uses and the just the information about all these little pots of money. So I hope to spend some time with them soon so that I can be a little more educated on this. But what I do want to comment on is that I really, maybe I should use a different word than appreciate, because that's what I said in the last topic, but I like that this list includes things that we need and that are they seem to be, from Wendy's description, very on target with what this pot of money was intended for. And it's something that will not just be to deal with COVID, because, at one time, I think it was, we talked about, or somebody suggested, humidifiers or air purifiers in rooms. And that is an immediate, thing to help with air circulation but in the long run, where are they going to go? Like, what are we going to do with all these box fans or, air? And so I didn't see anything so far on this list that's going to be something that's just going to be used for a little while and then poof, we don't need it anymore. So like the windows, I know the windows have been an issue at Redwood forever. I think that sounds wonderful. And, all these things, the vans, the PD, getting ahead of the Chromebooks. Anyway, it sounds great. And I'll hopefully by the next time we see it, I will have a little more information and research done as well.
So one of the things I'd like to talk to you about are the shade structures. And is that something that you want us to pursue? Does this sound like a good thing, or is this something we should abandon? And I'll explain why, but I need to know a yay or a nay. What are your thoughts?
Well, thumbs up, because I think this has been a need, at middle school at every site. And it's not just for shade. I would think on a kind of a misty day, they could still go out and eat. And it could even be a science learning area. We could use it for learning centers outside if it's covered. I think it's a need everywhere. So as long as they're structurally sound, and maybe you'll share that. But I think all of this list is very meaningful. And I agree with what Kathy's saying. And I also just want to, obviously, Wendy's never been, she's conservative with the money in the sense that if we can hold some aside to make meaningful future expenditures, that's important. And these are, learning loss ideas. But I think a lot of other schools are looking at some facility improvements and whatnot.
So here's why I'm asking. If we are serious about the shade structures, then we need to have a serious discussion about the look and where they go, because this is not a simple task. When the salesperson came around today and walked with Barry just to get an idea, because we wanted to be able to bring some quotes to you as a board so you could understand what we're looking at. At Redwood, the shade structure we were looking at was 30 feet by 40 feet to go right outside by room 67 on the blacktop there. The installation is extensive. They are going way deep into the ground, and those posts have to be secure. But the look of it, are you okay with, so I want to bring you some pictures the next time so that you can look at it. Redwood didn't seem like it was too bad. The biggest that they could fit there that made the most sense was 30 by 40. For Dana Gray, it was the same size, 30 by 40. And to install that shade structure and ship it up here without any architecture work, and we would need an architect, the quote came in about under $73,000 just for Dana Gray, just so you know where these numbers are coming from. For Redwood, the quote was also just under $73,000. Middle school was a little bit different because the middle school was bigger. We could fit a 30 by 60 shade covering between the cafeteria and the senior center, which is an ideal place for it to go. So because that's bigger, it's more money. An installation on that product and install is a little over 100,000. That does not include, again, the work that we would need done with the architect. And then the one that is most concerning to me is the high school. The high school has no real great place to put a shade structure other than the middle of the quad. So if you want to do the middle of the quad, when I was talking to the salesperson today, because he had just suggested a single slope, kind of like a carport, right? Single slope structure, 4 walls. And I said, you can't put something like that in the middle of the quad. It has to be aesthetically pleasing. This is a place where our community potentially gathers. And for the high school, it was also a 30 by 60 structure. And it was like 106,000. But my concern is because of the location of it being in the middle of the quad, it would make more sense to me that it has more of an aesthetic look instead of just like a parking structure right in the middle of the quad. Now, the other sites, you're going to say, well, Becky, why aren't you worried about the other sites? Because of the location of where that structure is going to be. At Redwood, it makes sense for it to be a single line because it'll match the roof lines of the other buildings. It won't look out of place. Make sense? The same thing with Dana Gray. It's off to the side, right outside of the cafeteria on the side next to room 60. So that, again, is not in a central location of the school. The middle school is between the senior center and the middle school. So the roof lines would match again. So I'm bringing this up to you because if this is something we seriously want to look at, I want you to have a say in the aesthetics of it, because the last thing that we need to do is to put something in and everyone is ticked off on what it looks like. So if you want me to bring you pictures next time so we could look at that, I'm happy to do it. I can send you the quotes so you can see this. I have another vendor sending me quotes tomorrow for a different structure. It's a 20 by 60. They don't do 30 foot wide, but both of these vendors are DSA approved, and that's the only reason why we're looking at them. So I believe the one from Park Planet is probably our best bet. They are stationed out of Red Bluff. The other company is stationed out of Huntington Beach in Southern California. And what I liked about Park Planet is that their installation was actually fairly reasonable, believe it or not. It was 11 to 15,000 for install, which wasn't bad. Yes, Kathy.
And when you say shade, it's like all weather, it's like, so we could use it in the winter.
Yes.
It's not like a, shade cloth that the weather would come through.
No.
Okay.
And let me see if I can find a picture for you.
Mary?
Oh, I love the idea of the shade areas for all the campuses. And I think an aesthetically pleasing one in the middle of the quad would help the quad at the high school look better anyway, because it's not aesthetically pleasing at the moment. So that would be a great addition.
Well, it's so bright.
Yes, blinding.
Karen?
Yeah, I'd definitely like to see an architectural rendering because I'm very suspect of the one in the middle of the quad. I just don't know how that's going to fit. And do we really need to, just because we put one at 3 sites that it makes sense, do we have to put a 4th one in necessarily?
Well,
Maybe.
The hard part about the high school, Jerry, I have to tell you that we used to have a covered eating area at the high school. And then the construction happened. And because of the accessibility issue to the 100 wing, the covered eating area had to go away to have the ramp for to get into the building. So there is no covered eating area. The other thing we could look at is getting like amusement park picnic tables with the hard plastic umbrellas, but those really don't provide shade covering. They kind of make it Ronald McDonald Land. So what makes more sense to me is that we find a place on the high school to have a shade structure. The difficulty is that the high school footprint is tricky. You don't want to put it behind the gym because you don't want to eat at the basketball courts. Do you put it on the side next to Timberwolf? Where the sand volleyball court is, but you'd have to put in concrete. You don't want to take away the redwood grove. We want to keep those trees there. So you can't put it where the fire lane is in between the culinary and the wood shop, because that has to be accessible for vehicles. Can you put it where some of the portable buildings are right now and cement that off? Well, then you'd have to get rid of the portables. So the high school is super tricky. The other side's easy peasy. We were able to go in, Barry said here, here, and here, not a problem. Match the roof lines, voila. The high school's tricky, which is why I'm bringing it up, because this is not something that any of us are going to make in isolation, not this decision.
And the other thing about the high school is right now, under the best of circumstances and times, there is no place for that many kids to gather to eat. The student union is teeny, and so this will allow us to feed more kids. And it's with the proximity and some extra carts and equipment, the food service people can have easy access to it too. But that site probably needs an additional eating area as much or more than any base, with trying to facilitate distancing.
I agree. I think that it's definitely something we need to look into, and I think all sites need it. And that, you definitely want to structure at the high school quad to be elegant so that it's not blocking natural light from the classrooms and not have it be an eyesore, and that it's structurally sound, that it won't blow over in the winter. So I like the idea. I feel like it's an extra space that can be used for instruction as well as eating, and maybe keep more kids at the high school eating on campus.
I'm trying to look for some pictures.
Okay. So we really have, this will go back on calendar or on agenda. My daytime talk comes out. I'm always tickling at work. The calendar. So we'll be able to discuss more thoroughly, and I would like to have more site staff input, and hoping people will chime in, especially maybe locations and what staff feel about these structures. I think the more stakeholder input that we have, and we pause to listen for, we'll be more mindful of quality of what we get to have for increasing, as the new term is, learning acceleration.
Right. We could keep this as discussion at least once a month if we wanted to, just as we get updates about things.
So this is one type of structure right here. Can you all see this? These are big ones. And this is a single slope structure that we're talking about for Redwood Dana Gray in the middle school. And it just concerns me to put something like this in the middle of the quad.
Do they come with the tables, or are those extra?
No, that's why we've budgeted to have the tables, because that'll be something we need. So this is a single roof line.
So are they all corrugated roof, like metal? So they're kind of farmy. It's a little more, I don't know the term because I'm not in construction, but a little more meaty than I thought. I thought they might be a little more flowy and elegant, but maybe that's just.
We could pay more for that. We could. But this is the type of structure that we're looking at for Redwood Dana Gray in the middle school.
I think the term you're looking for, Diana, is industrial.
Farmy. Okay. In any case, there's a flap, and that's a little bit. That kind of looks solar panel-y. Industrial is the word I'm looking for. And then back.
I actually like the 3-tier because it kind of breaks it up and doesn't look so meaty. Industrial.
So that just gives you an idea, but we could look at something in the quad that has more of a gable-like structure. It worries me to put something like that on the quad, to be quite honest with you. I don't know what it would look like. I would want to see it before we commit it, because once it goes in, it's going in. And I just worry if we're going to be taking away from that kind of outdoor theater setting that we have with.
And I'm sure we'll get other people to come out and give us ideas and quotes, and might have different styles that we could consider.
So I imagine that this is going to be something a lot of people are going to want. So if Becky asked us what our thoughts are, so I think we can't. This isn't an action item or anything, but can we give feedback that we do or don't want it, so that you can grab these people maybe? And because I assume that there could be a waiting list at some point because the schools have money.
So I have to tell you, Redwood Dana Gray Middle School are easy. And they're easy because of the location that we're putting them in. They're not conspicuous. They're really utilitarian in those spots. They work with the roof lines there. They're going to look just fine. The only one I am worried about is the high school. And someone is going to say, well, what about Alt Ed? We cannot invest any money into Alt Ed until we get their new site built. When they have a new site, we can talk about it then. But right now, to put any kind of big shade structure out in Alt Ed makes no sense. We have canopies, and we can give them more canopies to help them out. But for right now, Redwood Dana Gray Middle School, if you're good with this, I mean, any of the pictures I showed you at Redwood Middle School or Dana Gray would be just fine because of where we're going to locate them. The high school is the only one that worries me because I don't know where to put it. So Barry walked today with Jamie Bruce and the sales rep to look at the high school, and they all said the quad. And again, just worries me. It just worries me. I'm almost to the point where I'm going to say it might be worth the investment to put in a concrete slab to put it somewhere else. But the quad, again, is not super aesthetically pleasing right now. And it's bright. Like, even on a dingy day, you need your sunglasses because that concrete just comes up and gets you, and it gives me a headache. But I'd love to get, heaven forbid, a committee together to kind of look at it. But if everyone's for it, are you feeling good about the shade covers?
Yes, I would like further investigation, especially having it more.
I'm going to move forward for sure with getting more quotes so that you could look at and see if this is something we want to continue. And then we're going to need to get quotes for picnic tables and furniture because you don't just have something out there with nothing, right? And we'll see where that comes. And according to the gentleman that we met with today, they can get this done pretty quickly. It's not difficult. Their team comes in and does the installation from out of the area. Yes, Jerry.
I suspect they have the technology too to do some kind of a simple architectural rendering for each one, so we can actually get a picture of what it looks like on each side.
I can ask.
I just love the multifaceted of the use of having a shade cover, because it could be an outdoor classroom, and it's just maximizing your square footage. And so I just feel like it's been a need for a lot of years, especially I remember when I was on the site council at middle school, it was a huge need because kids are eating in, the breezeway, and they're eating in the quad, but it's too hot, or the birds are attacking them, like just to have, a structure like quasi structure would be a huge improvement on the real estate.
And also, I just want to make sure that everyone's good with the windows at Redwood. I think this is a great way, to be quite honest with you, for us to renovate, continue with improving Redwood, because the bond dollars are not going as far as we'd like them. And we even said in one of our meetings that the next two priorities was flooring and the windows. And we didn't know if we were going to be able to do either, because from the early estimates, the money was gone. So if you're good with the windows, we'll continue to explore that with the architects as well, and look to it. That's not something that's going to be able to get done quickly. That's going to take some time, but we can make sure that we're pursuing that actively. So are we good with the windows? Those are the two big heavy dollar items, are the shade structures and the windows.
Any objections, anyone? Because these are the kinds of expenditures that I'm excited about, because it is, keeping some of our reserves if we have something in that facility, fund in our general, in our normal budget, along with avoiding a future bond, project. That I think that's very efficient. So I appreciate those kinds of expenditures.
And is there anything else like that you could think of? Do you want us to do more vans? Do you want us to do something else? So think about it. We have time with this money, and it will invite the public to give us input as well. And we really did try and look at this money in a more global way on how we can spend it to do the most good for our kids. And we really looked at it also as one-time investments, which is how you need to look at one-time money.
So do we have any public comment in the interim as we're sharing this information? And this will, as Wendy said, could be put on agendas every month, and we can table as she finds more details about specific expenditures and pots of money and being efficient with it.
So we have no public comment at this time.
Thank you. And I think we have a lot. That's a great start of plans of using the money. And I think that we will just talk more about it at the May meeting. And it sounds like we might have a special LCAP meeting, first read in May as well. Do we? Anyone else have any final questions or comments? It's 8:04, so we've done a really good job. Are we ready to adjourn with no comments?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much for the information, and hope to get more input from all stakeholders. So good night, everyone.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you, folks.
Good night.
See you next month.
Good night.